All right. Well, we are now live after a few technical difficulties, probably operator error by yours truly, but welcome to the panel discussion of the 2014 Hokie Stormchase. And we have a distinguished group of panelists today, or this evening, I should say. And first I'll ask Trevor White to introduce himself and give a little bit of background about where he is and what he's doing.
Well, as Chris said, I'm Trevor White. I'm a master's student in the Department of Geography at Virginia Tech. I'm a programmer gone pretend meteorologist, most widely known for taking pictures of things sometimes.
Taking pictures of lots of things, which is why the rest of us don't even bother anymore, right? No. But yeah, Trevor's been a great addition to the trip, if nothing else for the photo log of what goes on. It's just awesome stuff he puts out, so appreciate that, Trev. And next to him is Mario Garza. Why don't you tell a little bit about yourself?
Okay, Mario Garza. I got a degree from meteorology from here at Virginia Tech, and now I'm a master's student in geography, studying biogeography and climate.
Okay. And when do you look to finish up?
Hopefully to defend in 2016 spring.
Okay, cool. Gotcha. And then last but certainly not least, we have Mr. Kevin Myatt. Kevin, why don't you introduce yourself and then make a few comments and we'll kick it into the discussion of the trip itself.
Okay, I'm Kevin Myatt. I write a weather column, weather blog on Roanoke.com Times. I've been a part of the Hokies now for, goodness, since 2005. 11 trips in those years and planning on 12 in June. This 2014 was unique in a way because at the very last minute, last few days, our leader, meteorology professor Dave Carroll, was unable to go due to some last minute contingencies. And for a couple of days, we weren't sure we were going at all, but it saw fit to let me be a designated leader with Chris as my very valued co-leader, and we were able to make this trip, and I'm glad we were.
Cool. Yeah, and it, as we will discuss tonight, it turned out to be a very productive trip for some really neat storms, although I think the pattern itself didn't look really conducive, but we saw some pretty neat things. So what we'll do is we'll just kind of take it day by day. I'll be referring over to the screen to my right for my notes, and of course you guys jump in anytime you got comments. We'll share pictures as we can as time goes on. So to kind of start things out, I did a write-up for this. I've been doing write-ups since I joined the Hokie Stormchasers in 2011, mainly for my own benefit, so I can remember kind of what happened. So it doesn't mean this is right, so if anything, any of the details are wrong, you guys make sure you correct me here. But I started out this write-up for last year's chase with one word, and that's cold. I have never been so cold on a storm chase in my entire life. We had to deal with a lot of, because of the pattern, as those of you remember the winter of 2014, which is kind of similar to this winter, this past winter in terms of the pattern. We had a lot of deep cold air intrusions from the north. We wound up, when we left on, we actually departed Blacksburg on May 18th. We were still dealing, when we got out to the plains, with the recycled moisture. The Gulf of Mexico really hadn't opened up yet. So a lot of the moisture was coming up the Mississippi Valley and recycling and going up into the high terrain, which is where we caught a lot of our storms, the high terrain in western Nebraska, Wyoming, Colorado, and New Mexico, as we talk about. So, but that's what we did. I think most of the time I wore my jeans and my windbreaker more on this trip than I ever have on any other trips.
Well, Dave always told us, puts in the list to take a hooded sweatshirt on the trip, and I've never wore it one time, and this year I wore it every single day. That's to tell you how cold it was.
Yeah, and trust me, if Kevin is wearing heavy stuff, you know it's cold. Okay. So yeah, we pulled out of Blacksburg on May 18th. It was a Sunday morning, in our 3 vans. We had the 4 of us panelists you see here, plus Jamie Morrow, who was going to be with us tonight, but he had about 5 other things going on. Plus he has to be at work at like some ungodly hour in the morning. But we left with 13 rookie chasers, plus the 5 of us that I just mentioned. We pulled out that first day and wound up in Columbia, Missouri. We went out the kind of the central route out to the plains, and we overnighted there. The next day, which was of course Monday the 19th, we pushed really hard to get out to the high terrain, to the high plains, to see if we could catch some of the storms. We wound up that close. We finally wound up in North Platte, Nebraska. As I remember, it was about 5 or 5:30 p.m. And the storms we could see on radar were still another about 2.5 to 3 hours west, which would have meant if we'd have pushed, it would have been dark by the time we got there. So we kind of punted, stayed in actually booked in a hotel in North Platte, and then, as I remember, we actually went south of North Platte a few miles to check out some convection that we thought might stir up some action. Anybody remember that?
Yes, it was a long shot, if you will. And when we got to that storm, it was very turkey neck-ish. When it was hitting the cap, it just fizzled out. I mean, but it was worth it. You know what? We were there. Why not go there and see what we can find?
Sure. I mean, we didn't have anything to lose at that point.
Exactly. It was just like day 2 and still early to start chasing anything.
Yeah, the image that I have up, I think, is the best turkey tower we got when we were up there. They didn't really get much better than that, and fizzled out pretty quick.
Yeah.
I put up another one here, just one of these kind of fizzly turkey towers with us kind of milling around the vans. It was pretty. It just didn't have enough juice in that environment. It was still, like you say, a little farthest. And fortunately, in a way, for us, those of us who were still awake, we actually got to experience those storms over during the evening, a little later on, about 10 o'clock.
Yeah, we were missing a bunch of chasers, and I actually kind of wandered out around the hotel, around the next hotel, probably a quarter of a mile to the west, and found about 7 or 8 of the students standing out there watching this line of storms come in, and the lightning display was awesome because as it was rolling in, you could see obviously a lot of cloud-to-cloud lightning, and as it got closer, you could see some cloud-to-ground, which was probably still another 15 or so miles away. And as it got closer, I wound up shooing them back to the hotel because I didn't want to have anybody fried the first night we were out there.
About, what was it, 10:30, that one big gust of wind with the dust through. Wasn't a lot of rain to it, a little bit. I think Chris and I had to move the van. We were afraid a tree might blow on them where we were initially. We moved like over to the side parking lot, if I remember right.
Yeah, I remember that. We had parked under the trees because it was well, it was the only place to park, and then we saw the wind coming and thinking about directions, and we think, it might not be good to start out the trip with a tree on the car either.
Yeah, there was when the gust front came in, there was us and other storm chasers from a different type of group who were all just watching the lightning show. The gust front came through, knocked some siding off of a building, some sheet metal siding, and it was it must have been about 60, 70 miles per hour gust front. It was incredible.
Yeah, that was a really good introduction, I think, for the students to kind of get their first feel of what storms were like out there.
Mm-hmm.
I was in bed.
And proud of it, right?
I was like, should I go get Trevor or not? But then I was like, oh, lightning, I can't leave.
Exactly.
Like, sorry, Trevor, come outside if you can.
So, well, the real action happened the next day. We got up that next morning on Tuesday morning, the 20th, had our morning meeting where we talk about where we might go and what we might do, where at least our initial location would be, and we decided to head west, further west, and we wound up in eastern Wyoming. And as we got there, I remember we stopped and checked radar. I think it was a rest stop on the interstate there. We checked radar and decided to blast north toward the storms we could see on radar anyway. And I remember driving north on that road. I was looking at as much as I could look when I was driving, but noticing the storm off to our west, and I was seeing a lowering underneath it as we were driving along, thinking, I think we made the right decision. So we drove on, and I forget how far it was, maybe 20, 25 miles, something like that, further north. We found actually, because looking for a place to pull all 3 vans off the road, we found the parking lot to a wildlife preserve on the west side of the road, which is pretty cool because we could pull all 3 vans in there, have plenty of room, and not be anywhere near the road to worry about people getting hit. And we actually spent quite a while there, didn't we?
Yeah, it was a beautiful setting too. I mean, just kind of the classic eastern Wyoming plains. There was a horse ranch next to us, and the lady came out and welcomed us, and
the horses did too.
Yeah.
Yep, these cute little fellows right here.
So and the lady told us that they'd had 8 inches of snow like 8 days before. So there was a lot. You could tell it was very green. They were not affected by the drought in eastern Wyoming, that they were farther south in the plains.
Right.
But stay there. I don't know what, an hour and a half or something, and
at least because I remember we watched 2 separate storms go by.
Yep.
One went by, one supercell went by just to our north, and we could talk about that one, and then the second one came in from the west. What you got there, Trev?
This is the storm that came in and just passed to our, just barely to our north. Also our horse friends. Yeah, the storm that passed just north of us while we were sitting there for however long was really interesting because, I mean, obviously this is our wall cloud up here on the close end of the RFD cut, but if I shot with my widest angle lens, I could end up getting blue sky and a wall cloud on a, reasonably impressive supercell in one frame, which is kind of notable.
You can see that clear slot right there too.
Yeah, you can. What you got, Mario?
I got some supplemental pictures, not as good as Trevor's though, but yeah, there's that lowering you see right there, and yeah, that was pretty impressive with the.
Yeah. And I remember that first storm, which I didn't pull one of the pictures up, but that's not one of those I pulled up to show tonight. But I had a picture of the storm of the horses in the foreground, about 2 horses fairly close, and then you look in the back and you can see that RFD cut, and there was hail floating down, several miles behind the horses. I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah, look at this picture right here. We see the Lorne right here, and we see the range shaft right there. It's a perfect separation between the inflow and the outflow.
Right.
And luckily we did not disobey that sign. There's going to be some tales of inappropriate driving later on in this trip.
I don't know if those should be tales.
Well,
I was trying to get up the tornado that we.
Well, that's a good segue, because as we were up there watching the storm where the horses were, a couple of students had wandered on down a little bit down the slope, and they started yelling and pointing west, and I couldn't see anything because there was like 3 trees in the whole place, and they were all between me and what they were looking at. So I ran down to the bottom of the hill there, and if I can get this to come up, this is my first picture that came up, and you can see a dust swirl on the ground there, and you can see what looks like a funnel coming down on the back edge of this wall cloud. This was the second storm that was kind of coming right at us, and sure enough, boy, we had a tornado.
Is that Jamie's picture?
No,
or is it the one that you took?
This is one I took. He has one that looks very similar.
I got one up too that's kind of similar there. I got one that it's kind of got the same, but later in the week, this picture was used by the Weather Service in Cheyenne to confirm that tornado. So score one for Hokie Stormchasers in 2014 that there weren't a lot of tornadoes, but we helped confirm one of them. So.
And actually, if you go back and look at the SPC reports that day, that was the only tornado reported in the continental U.S. that day.
That is true. Yeah.
And just from my experience, I was pretty sure early on that just because you could clearly see the rotation in it, and it was it was pretty neat. Man, somebody's cycling through a lot of big.
That's me.
There.
I don't know what I have. I should have cycled through these before. But I'm like, oh, look at that picture. Oh, look at that picture. Yeah. I mean, I love these pictures.
Yeah, they are good.
Yeah.
So, but eventually,
it was wonderful to just be there. Yeah.
It was. But eventually we did have to vacate because that southern storm was getting close. So we dropped back south along the same highway that we had come north on, and we got to the point where where I took this shot, and as you can see, it was cold. The hoodies, the coats, the long pants. And what I liked about this one is this storm was approaching us. This particular view doesn't show it, but this is very green right in here. That particular storm is pretty green.
Yeah.
It was. I don't know if this image shows it particularly well. I didn't jack up the saturation all that much, but that green light filtering out of the wall cloud there was very photogenic.
Yeah.
Yes, it was. And I also remember that it was a little bit of controversy when right when we pulled off to watch the storm from that angle. A couple of us, and I remember I did it too. We stopped and looked back to the north and saw what certainly caught my eye. It looked like it might have been a funnel underneath one of the storms to the north.
Actually, I've got that up.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
Yeah. This is obviously an extremely overcooked photo with oodles of contrast added. But I think at the time I voted a small wet microburst. But
I might have to be on Chris on that one because I did look backwards and I saw something, but it was such a short time that passed. I'm like, I couldn't be really definitive if it was what I thought it was. I'm not gonna say the T word on there though, but I did see something.
Storm Cruiser was over there, weren't they?
Yeah, there were a lot of chasers up that way, and I think Kevin made the point while we were out there that with all the chasers that were up in that area, if it had been a funnel, somebody else would have reported it, and nobody ever did.
True.
Yeah, I thought it just took a little too rain shafty, maybe. Maybe somebody mentioned a wet microburst. I wasn't convinced, but you never know. It's always good to get these photos and look at them later. And in any event, we scored at least one tornado that day. So, and
That is true.
And we continued with this chase on. We were right at the Wyoming-Nebraska border. We were never like more than 10 miles inside, and we just followed it back into western Nebraska.
Right. Trevor, that looked like a picture from that area.
That was taken while we were blasting east. This was a good-looking, rapidly rotating feature, actually.
Yeah.
I remember being unsure why the storm was not tornado warned at that moment. But that's probably one of my favorite photos from the chase.
It's a beautiful photo.
Right. And this is one of mine I've had on the screen share for a while. I mean, not screen share, but my screen as the background. It just gives you a picture of the flatness and then the terrain, the buttes in the background, and the storm coming across it. And you just don't get those panoramas back here in the east.
Oh, no.
Oh, no.
And I guess that evening brings us to my definite favorite photo of the chase, the lightning with the sunset. That was a great vista we found to watch the lightning show as that gust front finally rolled toward us.
Just to let everyone know, that was right where the horses were at. We have not left yet.
No, this was way later. This was
okay.
Well, after we had retreated east, even further east
right.
into Nebraska, and it was because the sun was going down. We just stopped and let the storm come at us. And yeah, I remember that. I remember I took some video clips there with it shows some pretty neat lightning coming in too.
Yeah.
Cool.
That's not yet to our dual supercell yet.
No. So anything else about that Tuesday that we want to talk about?
Well, it's always just so ironic to me that we talk about these violent supercells, but yet it was so peaceful. All these stops, just you could hear the rumbling in the distance and see the pretty clouds and that gorgeous flat with the buttes, and it just it was a day I never felt really threatened by any threat to us. These storms peacefully as they moved across from Wyoming to Nebraska.
Yeah, I thought it was a really good first full day of chasing for everybody, including the leaders that wanted to ease into it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was picture perfect. Yeah.
It was a kind of an exhausting day for me because I remember as we were coming into the storms, I had the iPad, the Delorme map, and a camera. And Chris, was I in your car? I don't recall.
You were for part of it. I don't know if you were the whole day or not.
But juggling all the hats, I was pretty happy when I turned the map over to somebody else.
Yeah, I mean there was a lot going on that day, and you between maps and taking pictures and stuff, you kept keeping you pretty busy. So, well, I have it in my notes that we called it a day as it got dark and headed to Kimball, Nebraska, which is where we stayed overnight. And then the next day, on Wednesday, May 21st, we got up and we had initially thought we were going to have a leisurely start. We set up forecast meeting at 9:30. Thinking about we were probably dropped south into Colorado, looking at based on some stuff we'd seen the night before. And I remember I went down to breakfast a couple hours. I usually get up a couple hours before the meetings and went down to breakfast. And there was a guy down there kind of giving some weather advice, if you call it that, to a couple. And so I listened for a couple minutes or 5 minutes or so, and then they got up and left. And the guy and I started talking. Turns out he was a forecaster from the National Weather Service office in Pueblo, Colorado. And I remember it was actually 2006. I met a forecaster from that office. So I kind of asked him, I said, hey, do you know this guy? He looked at me really funny, says, yeah, he's upstairs in the room sleeping. We're chasing today. So the upshot was I invited them to our forecast meeting at 9:30. Well, as we were gathering, it was about 9:25. Kevin and I were getting our act together. There was a few students in the room, and the two of them came and stuck their head in the door and said, look, we're leaving right now, and we suggest you do too, and here's where we suggest you go. If you can go park, if it was possible to park on the runway at Denver International Airport, we suggest that's where you go. See ya. And they took off. So we kind of cut that meeting short, I think, Kevin, didn't we? We didn't talk a whole lot.
We took their advice leaning that way, that general area, and they saw some data that indicated an early initiation. It did initiate early, but not quite as early as they were thinking. So, but we were well served following their advice, and that's exactly what we did. We headed south, and we got to that runway at Denver International as we could. Yeah,
we did. We got down there, and I remember we sat there for a while. We pulled up, and you could see aircraft taking off, and you could see commercial aircraft, and there was some Air Force aircraft kind of circling around, and we were literally on a road. There was nobody coming east or west or north or south, and we could see the airport and the terminal off in the distance. And we even had enough time, as I remember, to, after we were there for about an hour, to dart south toward the interstate, find potties for everybody, and come back to the same spot, and there was nobody there still.
I remember when we were doing the original forecast, Kenny and I were talking about the Denver airport, and then we heard you talk to the other person, to that forecaster, and we're like, yeah, Denver airport. So yeah, we arrived right there at the back of the airport, literally right in the back. And yeah, like you said, we're watching these planes take off, land, and take off. And we just, when we got back from the potty, we're just like eating sandwiches, just waiting for the storms to initiate. Sure enough, we saw them on radar popping up over the Front Range and coming towards the city.
And then we saw this.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is literally that little white line on the horizon right there, not this foreground, but back there, that was the terminal, the Denver International.
Yeah.
So this is what you're seeing is this wall cloud over the southern end of basically the southern end of the airport. We were standing there watching.
It was interesting to me that they had a tornado warning for the airport, but they airplanes kept landing and taking off during the tornado warning. I didn't know they did that.
Yeah.
But
they did.
The sky was dark, and they were still going in and out of that.
And
there was the infamous multi-vortex tornado reported down here somewhere that somebody reported. I never did see much evidence of it visually.
Oh, look. I got to screen share this. See how dark it was at Denver. Okay, there we go. Screen share. There we go. Share. this. Just see how dark it was. It's bright right here, and you could barely see that wall cloud right there. It was very incredible.
Yes, yes, and it was. We sat there again for a while until the rain got close enough, and we had to back off to the east. And I remember we kind of hopscotched a couple of times. We pulled off to the east, watched for a few minutes, pulled off further east, and dropped a little bit south, watched for a little bit, and then we got down to the exit route from the Denver area ahead of that storm. There were only two east-west routes. One was Interstate 70, and no chaser in their right mind wants to be on an interstate, when you're chasing. So the other one was the U.S. route that was paralleling Route 70. And guess where all the other chasers were on this same route?
And the place that we stopped to view the storm on that route was fantastic. This is probably one of the best views of a supercell base I've personally been able to witness. But as you said, chaser convergence was terrible. All those headlights streaming out of what really must have been hell with sideways hail and rain and all of the nastiness that comes with getting hooked.
Yes,
we were there before them.
Well, yeah, here's the picture that we had of, this is the east-west road I was talking about, and look, it's empty. About less than 10 minutes after this picture, this was jammed with cars and radar trucks and you name it. The reason I like this picture so much is we were standing on this hillside facing the storm, and the wind was at our backs. And while we were watching, this lowering came down and really tightened up, and because the wind was blowing at what, maybe 15 or 20 knots at our backs continuously, and it was cold again. All of a sudden, when this lowering went down and tightened up, that wind gusted to about 30 to 35 knots, just like that. And I'm thinking, uh-oh, the inflow just increased. This thing's going to drop. But it never did.
Oh yeah, here's those radar trucks right there. Late to the game.
Yeah. Of course, and it's always funny to see how many people are groupies are following the radar trucks. You know, wherever they go, the chasers who don't know what they're doing are just right there with them. You know. So, but I think, Kevin, you made the right decision as things really started getting busy. We took off to the east because it was too dangerous, wasn't it? Kevin, are you there?
Uh-oh. Did we lose him?
Did we lose Kevin?
And then
are you there, Trevor?
There he is.
Still got me.
There's a new one.
There's a new Kevin. There's two Kevins.
I'm back. I'm bouncing. I'm having a little trouble bouncing off and on here a little bit, but I presume we're still talking about Colorado. And I had a thought before I fell out this time, did you?
Well, we were just talking about that lowering that tightened up really well, right? Yeah, when the wind gusted really strong on our backs, I was thinking it was going to drop something, and then
the most
Go ahead.
The most impressive thing I saw about this supercell that chased us from Denver eastward was just how the entire storm was rotating in front of us. I mean, we see portions of a storm rotating, or this whole thing, you really see the base just spinning like a top. And like you, I thought it was going to drop right there. Stop we made, and of course we had to keep going to stay ahead of the Chaser Circus coming at our backs, and finally we kind of outran the storm and the Chasers, and we had decisions to make. But we still had 2-3 good hours tagging that from initiation to about the point it became it started to mesh into other storms and go north of us. So, I don't think we lost a lot dropping off when we did.
No, I agree. And that was actually, of all the cells that fired that day, that was the southern cell, which is, typically is the sweet spot because you're chasing something that's not fighting for inflow from the other storms. And, yeah, I think we made the best choices there. And I think you made a wise decision to leave when we did, just to keep ahead and keep leapfrogging ahead of the Chasers.
Yeah, those Chasers were definitely impeding traffic quite a bit.
I mean,
this was similar to a situation that Dave Carroll and I had in Oklahoma in 2010. That might even about 50% more chasing Kingfisher, Oklahoma area, and it was like a 70-mile parade, and we bailed off that one too. And I didn't get in that kind of thing again.
Oh yeah, and especially when you have 3 vans and you all have to pull out into traffic and try to keep in sight or at least within radio range. It was a good time to bail, and so we kept going east and we outdistanced everybody. And as I have my notes here, we actually stopped at Last Chance, Colorado, which there is such a place, by the way.
Appropriate name.
Yes, exactly. And all it is just a crossroads. And we had a decision to make because there were other storms. Another line of storms had formed off to the south and was coalescing. So we had to decide, were we going to punch south or were we going to keep running east in front of them? And we made the decision to punch south through the line, and I think we got through it about maybe 20 minutes before they started going severe. I think we timed that just right.
Yeah, it was a lot of rain, a little wind. There might have been, 10 seconds of hail, and we were through it in the sunshine.
Yeah.
So,
rather than running for 2 or 3 hours ahead of it.
In middle of Kansas or something, trying to outrun that line coming out of Colorado.
Right. Well, and by diving south, we were able to to overnight down in Lamar, Colorado, a little bit further south, which positioned us for the next day. So, next day being Thursday, May 22nd. I remember that day when we got up and we looked at models and we had our morning meeting talking about where we would go. Nothing really was exciting looking, but there was a good chance for storms over the high terrain in New Mexico. And that got me excited because I had never chased in New Mexico before. I'd been in New Mexico, but I never actually chased storms there. So that was a first for me on this trip.
Also, another first, we never chased in Kansas during this entire trip.
Exactly, and which I forgot to mention in the beginning. And then on this particular day, when we dove south through eastern Colorado and then over to New Mexico, that was the only time we set foot in Oklahoma. We never went in Oklahoma either, other than that.
We were in Oklahoma for, 10 miles, if that?
Yeah, it was just the northwest
tip of the Panhandle.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think Boise City and further west, and that was it.
I will add that in the 11 trips I've been on, and the ones I'm aware of that I wasn't on, this was definitely the first time we never set foot. We did a donut around it, and we came that close to not setting foot in Oklahoma, which is amazing. And considering the frustrations we had in Kansas and Oklahoma the year before, it was pretty welcome on my part to not go in those states.
True. So, but yeah, it's very unusual to not chase in either one of those states, and it just goes back to what I said at the beginning. Dealing with the recycled moisture we were having to use, we really needed the high terrain to provide the lift because the dew points were really low and it just wasn't that juicy. So, it kind of forced us into the terrain we were at. It didn't bother me really.
All we had was the slow upper trough coming out, and it was kind of weakening. It did come out later, a couple of days of more classic chasing, but like dealing with the high terrain features mostly.
Right. This particular day, we did cross, as we said, through the Panhandle of Oklahoma and headed west. We went I've got my notes here, a little over 20 miles southwest of Clayton, New Mexico. Yeah. We stopped kind of at the top of a hill and just watched a nice little storm go over the train. It wasn't really supercell. It kind of had it looked like it might have tried to get its act together, but it was just a nice little storm.
The LCLs were too high for it to be any promising supercell or any tornado at that.
Oh, exactly. So I just took this picture just to kind of show, the kind of terrain we're in, and it was just a nice hilltop spot to watch a storm. I enjoyed it thoroughly, even though we didn't see a lot.
Yep, I remember that terrain. I used to live in that terrain when I was a little kid, and I remember we're stepping, and people were noticing the little holes in the ground. I'm like, oh yeah, those are snake holes, and people are like, oh my god. I was like, it's okay, they're still basking.
What do you got there, Trev?
This is one of the images that I took when we stopped, I believe the first time, when we were trying to decide whether to wait for the storm to come to us or whether to throw caution to the wind and just go to it. I've made a mistake. Oh, there it is. But I mean, One Direction. Of course, the terrain was fabulous photographically. I mean, you've got this beautiful striated anvil over. Actually, the roads in New Mexico are also wonderful for the most part, except for that one, Mario.
We'll get to that.
But I mean, overall, this was our little hilltop spot. Pretty good looking storm considering the terrible setup.
Right, and that later, as that afternoon progressed, we wound up with the same situation we'd had the day before. A line of storms formed off to the south and west, and we had to kind of boogie east to get out to keep from getting trapped and lined out or by a squall line. So we headed back west into the Texas Panhandle this time. I think we stopped in, where was it, Dalhart? We had to get gas.
Dalhart.
And storms kind of got close there. I remember maybe one or two close lightning strikes. And so after we got gas, we kept going east. We wound up having to stop just before we got to Dumas because there were some storms crossing the road ahead of us. Actually, we did stop to watch some stuff pass by to our west to see if anything would happen. I think we saw some dust being kicked up by the gust front. Then we stopped and watched a couple of cells go in front of us as to our east as we were heading east on that road. Once the southern cell crossed the road, we continued on, and so we're driving along, and all of a sudden, one of the students in the left side of my van, yells out, "Hey, what's that in the field?" So I look over and I see a perfect landspout dust whirl, and I knew exactly what it was. So I got on the radio, pulled off the road as quickly as I could. And I didn't get any really good pictures of it because I was driving. Did anybody else get a good picture of that?
I didn't get any good pictures of it.
No.
Sorry.
It was interesting where we were. Where we were, there was no wind, so that ruled out it being a gustnado per se. We wasn't a gust front. Later, we kind of looked. There was an outflow boundary from the storm to the east that had caught up to the outflow boundary from the storm, I guess maybe to the south or west, and that would probably make sense for a landspout type tornado.
Right. Yeah. It was not a supercell tornado because it just wasn't vigorous enough, but there was enough, I guess, vorticity, and then the updraft kind of yanked it vertically, and you get that outflow, and between the outflow boundary coming in, and it was pretty impressive. So we watched that for a while, and I remember we had to keep moving because the southern cell kept developing kind of back over the road, and we were stopped at one point, and people bailed out of the vans, and I was a little nervous at this point because I could see the storm was developing overhead, so I was literally leaning out the driver's side window, looking straight up, just like that, and seeing a funnel, literally at 12 o'clock right overhead. When I finally recognized it, I dove back. I yelled at people to get back in, got on the radio, said, "Let's go," and I think I pulled away before the door was even closed.
And that's the image that I've got up on my screen.
Yeah,
right there.
It's that little guy right there. But to really put it in perspective, from the diagonals of this image are, I think, 110 degrees apart. So this pretty much was very close to being overhead. And I'd been watching scud coming up off the ground and coalescing into this wall cloud. And I was photographing the sequence and thinking, that's looking awfully wall cloudy. This is making me slightly uncomfortable. And then it sort of became this little laminar finger, and I was like, Robert, hey, that's a funnel, isn't it? And then Chris called out everybody in the vans, and we boogied.
Yeah, that was that was an interesting time because we kept moving down that road, and I remember we tried to spread out the vans a little bit so we could watch each other's back, not being so close. We spread it out a couple hundred yards, I think. That was the time when, as the lead van, I pulled off the road, had everybody with their hands on the doors ready to get out, and just as I came to a stop, boom! We had a lightning strike 75 feet away in the field, and my heart just about stopped.
I was about to jump out of that van, and I remember Anna was trying to open the door, and she just couldn't open it. I was like, you gotta unlock it, and then the lightning hit. I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna stay in the van.
And you know, there's nothing quite like the lightning strike in a field where you can see the little puff of smoke floating away afterwards.
Yes.
Yes. That's when you know you're too close.
Yes.
That might have been that maybe the second most frightening thing I've ever had on a chase trip. You know, just because you know that if we'd been out there, it would have found a closer path to the ground through one of us or through the vans. So I'm glad for the timing of that. It was just a second or two difference there in what could have been a more serious situation, but it was pretty scary, really. It was exciting, but scary.
And I mean, if we'd have had the mezzanets, we would have been even better lightning rods.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Well, one of the things that people ask me about in storm chasing is, what am I scared? What have I ever been scared of? And my first answer out of my mouth is always lightning, because it's so unpredictable. And I should point out for those of us that are watching this now or later, when we feel threatened, when there's a lot of lightning around, we don't get out of the vans. Okay, and that's sometimes we'll just sit in the van, tell people don't touch anything metal. Because as long as you're away from the metal, the car itself or the vehicle itself acts as a Faraday cage. You're protected. But that particular time, we hadn't seen a lot of lightning. There hadn't been much with this storm, and all of a sudden, this came out of nowhere.
Yeah, and people ask me too. It's like, oh, storm chasing is so dangerous. You can get hit by tornadoes and stuff like that. I was like, no, the lightning was that lightning strike was very scary because, like I said, I was about to jump out of the van. I was about to be the first one out there, and I would have been fried Mario. Extra crispy.
Extra crispy Mario, huh?
Luckily, the van was locked, and we couldn't unlock it. So that was one of the most memorable parts of this chase for me.
Okay. Well, as that evening progressed, we pushed on further south and west and kind of got out of those storms, but then we decided we need to drop further south toward the Amarillo area, because we wanted to jump on Interstate 40 and go a little bit, probably about an hour west of there for the night. Well, unfortunately, it was almost like a little MCV, mesoscale convective vortex, set up just south of Amarillo, and it almost looked like a pinwheel on radar. And storm just kept going over the same area, and it was raining.
Lots of precip.
Yeah, it was cats and dogs. So we got down in the Amarillo area, and we started started to get down to the interstate. And of course, in those of you, anybody who's been through Amarillo knows the interstate there is elevated. So to get to the interstate, you have to go on a ramp to get up to it. Well, the first ramp we came to was flooded. It was like half a dozen cop cars there, barricaded.
Yeah, lots of rescue vehicles there too.
Somebody had driven their car into the ditch.
Right. So yeah, we weren't getting on the interstate there. So I forget who was riding shotgun. Were you shotgun with me that day, Mario? Or somebody was. I can't remember.
No, I was with Kevin on that one.
Somebody was me then.
Pardon?
Probably me then.
Oh, so I blame you. We were looking for another road because we knew there was another exit about a mile further west. But how do we get there? So we went south of the interstate, took the first right, which turned out to be a dirt/mud road with 3 minivans. Went down that road and came across a pickup that had slid off the road, stopped and checked them. And trust me, we weren't going very fast. I think I was creeping along at about 10 miles an hour. Got down to the next intersection, and lo and behold, it's covered with water, flowing water. And what's the National Weather Service motto? Turn around, don't drown. Yeah. So I stopped, and we're dithering. Remember, we dithered there for quite a while, trying to figure out what to do, and finally a couple of us got out and got our feet wet to see just how deep it was. And meanwhile, people were coming from the other side. Vehicles were coming from the other side and going through it. It didn't look too bad. And then we have Robert Stonefield sitting back there. What's he saying?
Just go through it.
It's not that deep.
Not that
It's
deep.
not
Just go
that
through it.
deep.
So we finally determined. I mean, we couldn't turn around on that dirt road. I mean, we would all been stuck in a ditch if we tried that.
Yeah.
I think. So I finally wound up going through the intersection, and it really wasn't that bad. It was it was more standing water than it was flowing water. I think that's what it turned out to be. So we got out and got on the crown of the road, went back to the interstate, and we were fine. But that was a little nerve-wracking there for about 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Lightning and flooding, two of the things that we worry about the most, and we encountered both of them that day.
Yeah.
The storms were not exceptional that day, but gave us a little excitement, and then a lot of trouble. So I was glad for that day to be over with, very honestly.
That was an exhausting day.
And a good point, Mario, because I think that led us to make the decision the next day, which really wasn't a good big honking setup for us to go chase. We decided to take it easy that day.
Yeah, it was, should we go down the southern New Mexico and Texas border, or just, I was like, well, after that lightning strike, I think it's time for some laundry.
That might be TMI, Mario. But
well, I was pointing at Robert when I said that. I was like, after that lightning strike, some people may have got a little scared. So I think it's time that we need to take a breather, because that day was extremely exhausting. I mean, I was working the navigation. I was, and then the lightning strike. I mean, my heart was still beating from that. So
yeah. So,
and plus, we covered a lot of miles on that day too.
And I think that's one important thing for chasers, especially new chasers, to note is that you can only chase so many days in a row, and you need a break, mentally and physically. You just need to be out of the van for a while. And that's what we did. We dropped south. This is Friday, May 23rd. We dropped south from the interstate to Hereford, Texas, and where we found a laundromat, and then we had a good place to eat lunch, and then we actually found a playground. Remember, we all got out, stretched our legs, and played games, threw frisbees, walked around, whatever we needed to do to just chill for a while.
Yeah, I had a picture of my clothes in the dryer going round and round. I was like, found some true vorticity circulation.
Well, yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, yeah, that was a nice rest day. It was definitely needed, because after that, it was nonstop until our drive home.
Well, and this picture that I have tells that it's a rest day, because this is dinner in Clovis, New Mexico, and on a chase day, you never get a chance to eat dinner. This is just a nice sit-down dinner.
How exhausted we looked.
Yeah, everybody was just kind of, oh.
Yeah, on a chase day, you never order off a menu someone hands you.
Exactly. That's a good way to put it, Trev. You might be grabbing stuff out of the cooler and running. Exactly. All right. Let's see. I've got on my notes. Oh, that's right. I remember that night. That hotel we were at was kind of near a railroad track, and I thought I was hearing trains all night. It turns out I was, but I was also hearing passage of an MCS that went through that night and continued that morning. It was pounding down rain, lightning, thunder, and of course to a chaser that means an overnight MCS means it just screwed up chasing for a good chunk of the next day, and that's what happened.
If you remember, the day before was like that too. When we were at Vega, Texas, we had the morning MCS. And the day after this, we had MCS. So it was this area was in moderate to extreme time. You got to remember that too. And these people were loving it. We were bringing the rain to them. But as you point out, this day coming out of Clovis, this MCS really messed up our plans.
Yeah, this area was on fire like this previous summer and spring. So yeah, the rain was definitely needed.
Yeah, the locals were happy about it, but we weren't, because we know what it meant. It meant the atmosphere was stabilized and convection was probably not going to happen. So
the MCSs eat up the Cape, and that's our fuel for the atmosphere, giving us these storms. MCS blows in the morning, it just eats up that Cape. And
it drives the outfit went way east, and there were storms, and there were good ones, but they were too far east for us to catch that day.
Oh yeah, that outflow boundary was ahead of us and accelerating away from us. I don't. We couldn't have caught up with it if we tried, I think.
Well, it was of all the models and all the forecasts and all the forecast discussions and even our best guess. It was it was blowing through Midland, Texas by the time we were down where we wanted to be, which was the southeast corner of New Mexico, very west Texas.
Right, and we did wind up south of or southwest of Midland, down there south of Interstate 20 in that area, We saw one little bitty storm. I didn't even bother pulling up a picture because there really wasn't much to it. You got one there, Trevor?
Yeah, this is actually one of my favorite storms we saw. Is beautiful. Actually, I distinctly remember titling my blog entry from this day "The Best of the Bust." Because despite it being a bust day, I ended up really happy with. I mean, I think I've got 5.
Look at that landscape. That landscape's beautiful.
Oh yeah, pancake flat landscape, and you've got this little storm, this little base, and little bit of rain, and this fueling this huge anvil overhead. And
another road
a picture of the road. I have to do that. Then we were treated to an amazing Nevada's field during sunset that night.
Yeah, I think I don't know who took it. I don't know if you were riding with me, Trevor, but I handed somebody my iPhone. They took a couple pictures for me with the Mamadas. That was just really nice.
Beautiful.
Yeah, I think it was me riding with you because I think we discussed this updraft as to whether it was worth lingering very long to see if it would become anything.
Yeah, I remember that, and I think we rapidly came to the conclusion that nah.
Yeah, pretty much.
So, but that Mamadas picture, we took that on the way to our overnight lodging that night, which was in Colorado City, Texas, which was I forget how far it is from Midland, but it's a ways east of there. So we zonked out that night, got up the next morning for our morning meeting, and guess what was happening? Another MCS.
Yes.
It was cold outside. It was raining. And we were trying to figure out, all right, where do we go from here? So after, and this was Sunday, May 25th, after what had happened the day before of not being able to find any good convection, we decided to just, blast all the way into New Mexico to get away from the MCS effects.
There was some debate of where should we go. I mean, like the models were showing, hey, the Mexican border in Texas were perfect, though, but the geography was absolutely terrible, and plus, I don't feel comfortable chasing near the Mexican border.
We had a classic storm chasing debate between playing the dry line to the west. When that was in eastern New Mexico, Texas Panhandle kind of area, where the road network is reasonably good, Mario. But the better dynamics were down way near the Mexican border, but it looked like the storms would end up being better. And it was the classic debate of do we roll the dice on a better storm, we may have to kiss goodbye and a bad road network, or do we take a riskier dry line setup that is patently chaseable?
Right.
And we ended up playing the dry line.
And we did, and we went and sat just outside of Lovington, New Mexico, and basically watched these things go up for a while. Updrafts go up, spin off an orphan anvil, and then come back and do the same thing again because there really wasn't enough moisture at this point. You got anything there, Trev?
Oh yeah, it's just an orphan anvil going up prior to our pretty towers that we ultimately found.
Yeah, because we wound up because things weren't going well enough for us. We decided to head towards some. I'm looking at my notes here. There's actually convection around Roswell that we could see on radar. That was looking pretty good. But before we got to Roswell, we stopped and took a look at some things we're developing right across the road in front of us.
Yeah, we were on 380, and then we were looking at some storms that were coming out of Roswell. We wanted to intercept them on Highway 70. So looking at the software, the navigation software, I was like, it did show. I told Kevin, I was like, there's a little line right here between 380 and 70. It just doesn't, I don't know. Let's just go for it. And that was the infamous open range road. So we were on this open range road, and there's cow pies on the road. There's cows crossing the road, and goats, I believe. I don't know. There was a lot of farm animals on there, and we were just hoping to get to Highway 70, but that road just ended. It kind of went backwards, and then as soon as we saw this beautiful looking cell by itself no other adjacent cells near Lovington, New Mexico. And I remember there was some chasers in the back seat there staring at the radar. I was like, yeah, we've been looking at this. And I'm like, we should go after this one. So we hightailed it down to down one. Let's see, where do we go? Yeah, we hit like 172 or 214. We went down to Lovington, New Mexico, and intercepted this cell.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I got one look at. I got one look at that cell. Just turned in my head, knew immediately. I said, "We are going for this." So we were there till 30 minutes before sunset, but it was a gorgeous cell. And of course, the open rangeland roads were new for me on a chase.
They can be new for a lot of people, Kevin.
we had to get. Basically, whoever was riding shotgun we had to drive a little slower, and they had to watch for these, herds of cattle crossing the roads. We had to stop. There were some cows looking kind of mean at us. I think they might even pursue us. But we finally got back to the regular highway and had just enough time. And thinking about this storm off in the distance, and it looks like Trevor may have it up there.
Yeah. Just to give an idea of like how discreet this storm was. I mean, it basically fired into blue sky.
Yeah.
And, you can actually see the little flanking line there.
Yeah.
Definitely Kevin, I think you referred to it as a drool-worthy supercell, and it surely was.
It was gorgeous.
It's unusual on these trips that alone. Usually it's in a cluster of other storms, or you're blocked out by an anvil of another storm. And here this thing was sitting out in the open, and it was high based enough we could see some of the features 30 miles away, and we went all out for that. And this was my favorite storm of the trip. This lone cell in southeast New Mexico, and some of the photos will come up here, or let's see, Trevor's got some here.
Well, I
guess that's sort of my favorite photo of the base that I have up.
Yeah. But I remember we stopped just north of the storm to take pictures, and I've got a video clip from my dash camera, my dashboard video of stopping there, and people running over taking pictures and jumping back in vans, and we take off to the west and then dive south in front of it. I don't think we were as close as you thought we were, Kevin, but I know your sphincter was pretty tight at that point.
Yeah, it was. I remember we had to make a decision to dive south on this road, and I had a picture up. I can't really get it up, but we're like, it almost looks like we're under the supercell, looking at the different elements of it on each side, and this was another open rangeland road. I have to point out, it wasn't as many cows, but so we're
scenic route.
We have a supercell on our tails, and we have cows running on the road. And it's also an oil field with a lot of interesting smells. So really a big taste of southeast New Mexico in this supercell.
Well, it was, and I remember when we finally got far enough south of the cell that we felt like we could stop, I climbed out of the van and looked around and was immediately confused because I could look to the southwest and see a wall cloud. I looked to the northwest and saw a wall cloud, and I looked to the northeast and saw a wall cloud. So I was really confused until I finally got a chance to look at radar and realized this thing had broken up into 3 separate updrafts, and every one of them was dropping a wall cloud. And we finally got far enough south. Let me see if I can share this picture that I took. Mine pale in comparison to some of Trevor's stuff, but this is one of my favorite shots. Again, you can tell how cold it is, the hoodies and the coats, but looking south, this is the southernmost wall cloud right here. You can see the rain shaft. It was just an awesome sight. Of course, the lightning was flashing everywhere.
We watched the early evening. The lightning show continued. It kind of fizzled as it moved north of us, which was good. We ended up spending the night in Lovington, which was right in the path, so it was a good thing it kind of washed out. But, it really just an interesting, spectacular, exciting chase that day.
Well, I remember I loved the lightning show because this image was taken, I don't know, probably 20 minutes before this one. We're basically we're in the same neighborhood at least, and we just started to see this fantastic lightning, and then we blasted south.
We went south.
This radio tower that's right there, becomes right here in this image, right over here on the right side of the horizon. But just a wonderful structure with this laminar base, and of course it was all lightning lit. It was definitely a fabulous storm to photograph.
Yeah, it was, and I was really impressed with. There were a number of chasers around it, but it wasn't flooded with chasers. We didn't really have what I would call chaser convergence, and to be that spectacular a storm, I thought that was pretty unusual.
They all went to Mexico.
Yeah,
it's true. A lot of them did. A lot of there were. We saw on the image of the chaser where it shows what the chasers are. There were a couple of them that were in Mexico, and others were in national park, and we had just a smattering of us. Yeah.
I remember I was asking because I have Sprint and people had Verizon, so they had better reception. And I was just asking Kenyon and Chris, like, where's the chase convergence? The entire chase. We're just kept trying to stay ahead of them so we can know when to bail on the storms if we had to. Because nothing's worse than chase convergence. Well, except for getting picked up by a tornado.
We were all alone on that one road diving south in front of the supercell. I mean, there was nobody else doing that, so that was really special.
Yeah. And one thing I should point out, too, before we go to the next day's chase, this particular weekend was Memorial Day weekend, and almost always, I won't say every year, but almost every year, there's something good to chase over Memorial Day weekend out west. And there have been a number of chases what I've been to where, especially when the Hokie Stormchases have divided up into two chases, where Memorial Day kind of falls in between them, and we invariably miss some kind of outbreak over the Memorial Day weekend. So I was glad we were out there for this, and for this storm, which was on this Sunday, but then Monday, the 26th, Memorial Day, I think we might have broken another Hokie Stormchase record. Maybe, Kevin, you can correct me if I did, but we actually either chased or caught sight of it at 4 separate tornadic supercells that day.
Only 2008 Waukene, Kansas, when it was just, we saw 10 plus, and it was just like an open air video game. That's the only thing I can think of. See that many tornadic supercells in a.
Okay.
But we overnighted in Lovington, if I remember. Nice local establishment.
Good breakfast.
And good breakfast. Yeah. Well, we'll have to remember that place in the future forever back.
And
in
it was
Southeast
cheap
Mexico.
too. It was the cheapest of them all.
Yeah, we don't want to talk about 2 nights later, but actually the next night. There's the next. But in any event, we figured we need to go southeast towards Big Spring, Texas, on the interstate there. And we found we found the Big Spring at Big Spring, Texas, and spent a little time at the park there waiting on storms to fire. My pictures aren't working right now, but it was really pretty there, and this day looked promising, and it did live up to its promise, I would say.
I thought it did, because we started seeing storms firing, and we decided to go north of the interstate and found a nice spot on a road to watch this particular storm come in. And I got a number of shots of this, but the reason I wanted to show this one is this is the wall cloud. This is not a shelf cloud. This is a wall cloud. And if you notice, it's actually sucking up dust from this freshly plowed field. This is dust being sucked up into the storm, so you can tell the updraft was pretty strong.
I'm back.
Okay. But that was the first storm. We stayed on that storm for what, maybe half an hour or so. We stayed ahead of it, Kev.
Yeah, that was about right. It started looking a little outflow dominant, and I remember an experience 6 years ago with the road network north and east of Big Spring that blocked our pursuit of a supercell there, and I didn't want to get back in that. So yeah. Plus, there were tornado warnings going out for the cells that were firing southwest along that line. We could already see some of the bases in the background as we left this storm southward. So we hightailed it through Big Spring and headed quite a bit south of Big Spring to set up for some of these open.
Yeah.
I remember that wall cloud coming over that hilltop and Big Spring, and we're just racing to get past that so we can head south.
Yeah, I the couple images I have of this wall cloud, I think Kenyon actually said like that storm had a really good looking "I'm gonna kill you" wall cloud. It was it was
ground
beautiful, beautiful wall cloud. I was spinning like a top too the whole way.
I think I saw it in the rear view a couple times.
Yeah, I wasn't doing a lot of looking. I was driving at this point.
This I shot out of the passenger window.
Yeah, we did keep driving south because we actually, when we pulled off that first storm, we were going after the second storm in the line because there were actually 4 of them lined up, you know, slightly staggered a little bit further south each one, and as I remember, all 4 of them wound up on radar having that classic supercell flying eagle look. I'm thinking, man, we have hit the jackpot. So we dove further south, and at this point there were a number of chasers in that area, but we were ahead of most of the pack. So we went, I'm guessing, I didn't look up the distances, but probably about 15 to 20 miles south of Big Spring, pulled off on a road, on a westward-facing road, and just watched that second storm coming at us over a ridge line. And we'd been there maybe 20 minutes or so, or a little bit longer, and I looked up and I saw this picture that I was going to share with you guys just as it was coming over the horizon in front of us. And that, I went back and looked, and in between the time where I took this photo, there was just before this photo and just after this photo, there were 2 separate tornado reports in that area. So I think we're safe in claiming that as probable tornado we saw from that vantage point.
Yeah, I got a shot here of just the one of the supercell just filling the sky behind us. This is one of my favorite shots of the trip that I took. Just you can see one of our chase fans, and just that supercell filling the western horizon. You can see the nice rounded anvil. But we had a good vantage point there for a while. We had to abandon it eventually as the storms and the chasers arrived.
Yeah, we did. As a matter of fact, that road that you showed there, Kevin, within probably 15 minutes of that tornado or funnel picture I took, that was full of cars headed in that direction as with chasers as well. So we bailed off a bit further east, and then south on the road we'd come out of Big Springs on. Went down kind of over a hill and sat and watched the second storm come, and then the base of that storm disappeared over the hill, and we were thinking, you know, that looks pretty good. What if we just peeked back over the hill to see what it was?
Oh my gosh!
What it looked like. And when we did that and pulled off, this was the picture that I took. And that was the base of the storm crossing the highway. We had just come down. This is looking north. And I was duly impressed.
Well,
that was an incredible storm.
The frame that I've got here was when we had driven over the hill and stopped and waited for it to come in. I had to wait for the sun to go behind the storm again to be able to make some photos. But this is one of the first ones I shot. Beautiful structure with the striations. But then when we got back up over the hill, the structure here was fantastic with this inflow band and the wall cloud down in the valley. It was pretty much picture perfect. And then as we dropped south away from it, we were treated to a wonderful view of the updraft with the laminar base and the I guess that'd be the I guess that's technically a shelf cloud there, and then the wall cloud inside with bubbling convection.
See the sun peeking there too.
Yeah, that's the best storm I've seen structure-wise.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, a similar picture to that is the background of one of my computers. So
nice.
And of course, our intrepid leaders.
Yeah, I see you and you see me, right?
Kevin, you're not wearing your sweatshirt.
It's
like his only picture.
I got one right now. I probably wore this on the trip.
So,
but then we had another storm come up. That one went by, and yet another one rolls over.
This is the third storm, isn't it, Trev? This picture?
This is the last one we saw that day.
Yeah, that was the last one.
And the reason I really like this image in particular is you can see the I guess it's a tail cloud coming from the forward flanking precipitation, but all this is flowing into what is the inflow notch around here, and up here is the rear flanking gust front. So we were actually looking at cloud structure indicative of a supercell radar signature, which is just really interesting to see from an academic standpoint.
Oh yeah, there's Kevin with the same thing in the background.
Yeah, this is a picture, Chris. I had Chris shoot a quick picture of me and Supercell, which this photo gets a lot of play on my computer desktops and such.
Shelfie.
Somebody says I look kind of like a sorcerer there with my hands, making it happen. But
look what I did.
Yeah, but I think this was. I'm losing count too. If this was 3 or 4 was the one that was the next one that we actually. It was getting dark. We just had to get south and out of there.
I think you're right, Kev. I was just looking at my pictures, and I think if I got this one right, this is the 4th storm. It was actually getting dark at this point, and you could see the greenage there. And again, it was cold outflow. I was almost shivering taking this picture, but we had to keep pressing south because this storm was kind of encroaching on us. So now we have pretty much finished up that particular day, and then we faced the challenge of once we got out of the way of the storms, where do we stay? We called around. We had, I don't know how many hotels we tried, Kev, but it was a lot of them, wasn't it?
Well, and the problem was both Midland and San Angelo were getting blasted by storms, so those bigger areas for us. And this left us pretty much to small towns in the oil fields out in southwest Texas, and we ended up at I don't even remember Rialta and
Rankin. Yeah.
It was pretty expensive, and
my bed wasn't even made.
What's that?
My bed was not even.
Your bed wasn't made?
Well, apparently the waitress or the maid quit in the middle of her shift. So I'm like, well, I guess I'll make my own bed. And it was the most expensive hotel we've ever booked.
And we just had to land somewhere, though. And
we were tired.
Yeah, and we didn't want to drive another 3 hours, and we didn't want to go too far west and south because we were starting our trip back to Virginia the next day. So we parked where we had to, and thanks to Mario finding us some cheaper rooms along the way, we were able to swallow that one night and do okay.
Lovington.
Yeah.
Lovington was good, and the next night in Texarkana was pretty, both in cost and in the experience. So
this was the best view that we saw in Rankin. This was the morning that Kevin and I got up because the hotel had no breakfast, so we went down to the only little convenience store in this one-horse town and bought, I think, a couple things of donuts or whatever they had, and brought them back to everybody to eat on. But that was the reason I took the picture and kept it was because that was one of the very few mornings that trip where it wasn't pouring down rain with the MCS over top us.
Also, that place smelled like natural gas a lot.
That's the economy there, so it's a smell of a lot for them. But we were ready to go that morning. I remember that day we had some possibility. We had an upper low or something coming to Texas, but we didn't want to get. We were afraid the storms would go, and they did develop. Like central Texas head southeast, and Chris didn't want to make another trip to Houston like he did in 2013. So
No.
So we stayed north and tagged some of the weak kind of cells that bubbled up in north central Texas, and saw some pretty things, but nothing really severe, and started motoring eastbound.
Trevor's got some really nice pictures of just like random foliage in that. Stops. I'll show them. I mean, I got it up here on my screen.
Go for it.
Let's put it right there.
I'm diametrically opposed to not posting something from a given day, so I just making pictures of things.
I was like, these are amazing pictures. I mean, let's take a look at that. The cactus. We got the flower. I mean, it's not just about storms. It's about seeing the country, a different part of the country,
right?
And seeing really cool stuff. Like, look at this rainbow over Arkansas. I think that was Graham, Texas. My bad.
Yeah, that was North Central Texas.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
We ended up staying in just barely out of Texas in Texarkana, Arkansas. I mean, I think you could have thrown a football across the state line from our hotel. And we finished up. Well, we took 2 days to finish up, but that day we did go to the tornado paths of Valonia, Mayflower, Arkansas. So the damage is about a month old at that point.
Right.
Had a great meal that day at Nick's Barbecued Fish in Carlisle, Arkansas, my home state of Arkansas, living up to its reputation. And,
Yeah, that place got a perfect 5 in my book. I mean, memorable.
It'll be on the list for future storm chases if we're in that area and have time. And Trevor may have a picture of the damage in Valonia. I don't know. I don't have it up.
Yeah.
Yeah, Trevor was the only one we were really wanting to take pictures because we didn't want to make it obvious that's what we were there for.
Yeah.
It was definitely very sobering to pass through that area.
Yeah, and like you said, Kev, this is like 4 weeks after that tornado.
And we do this. We've done this before. We went to, I think, 2012, and went to Caruthersville, Missouri in 2006. If we have a chance to go to a tornado damage path that's too fresh, like it happened last week, and the locals are still really have a lot of angst about it. We'll do that just because it is, as Trevor said, it's very sobering. It reminds us we do this. It's not all fun and games about. We do love seeing these big storms and how beautiful they are in the open terrain, but it's also the students are learning. We're learning about how to warn communities to severe weather, and we see the damage that they wreak, and it reminds us why we do this.
Right, and I think it's important to, especially, we all have to keep in mind, that this trip every year is an educational trip. It's to take the skills that the students learn in the classroom and apply them in the real world. And then when we see scenes like that in Valonia, or like we saw in Joplin, Missouri in 2012, it gives you a feeling for how important good forecasts are and how much the weather can impact people's lives. And I think that was an important trip. I won't call it a detour, but an important trip that we took. I appreciate you taking us through there, Kev.
It was some old territory I used to drive through, and it's sad in a way to see. Very sad to see places I was familiar with damaged that heavily. Not the first time, obviously, having grown up in Arkansas, there's a lot of tornadoes there. But
right,
I was glad to get a chance to take the students through there, and glad to have that good meal too on our way home.
All right. Well, we're getting close to needing to wrap up here. I don't want to go too long with this, even though we got started late. First of all, what I'd like to do is to ask each of you and you can drop me an email or something, and I'll put this in the comments section on the YouTube page. But if you could give, say, new chasers, your one go-to website when you're chasing and you want to do forecast, either like for the next day or the day of, where do you go? Trev, let's start with you.
This was something that we used a lot in the 2013 chase that I hadn't really come to know and love, but the SPC Observed Soundings Analysis page, especially for day of, looking at those 12Z soundings, projecting them on the wall every morning, looking at roughly around your target area, gives you a wonderful idea of how your parameters are.
Okay, that's a good one. Hey Mario, what do you think? What's your one go-to website?
My one go-to website during the storm chasing only, not for like regular forecasting, is the College of DuPage. I call it College of DuPage to make it sound fancy, but it's incredible because while looking at soundings is great, but I really love the satellite imagery that you could see. You could see that open it up. You could see the little popcorn balls in the atmosphere. And you can see the ripples. When you see the ripples in the satellite pictures, you can see there's a lot of shear up there. And then when you see the little popcorn of cumulus clouds, you can see there's already a good moisture there, and you can see that there's going to be some activity there. So, and they have really high resolution. You can select low resolution, high resolution satellite data. And also another thing too is their numerical models They got the HRRR, they got the RAP, they got the NAM 4K, GFS. They're adding much more too, and they're also changing the interface now, which I'm gonna be excited to try out on future storm chases. That they're changing it so it's easier to slide to future times just with a finger or a touchscreen. So they're making it more adaptable for mobile devices, and it's a great.
It's a lot easier on an iPad nowadays.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, it's they just recently changed it for just even touchscreen desktops too.
Right. Okay. All right, Kevin. What's your go-to website?
Well, I'm going a little older school here and going to Earl's page, wxcaster.com. There's just a huge amount of models you can get there simply, and it's quick and simple, and you can find just about anything you're looking for there. It's not quite as flashy as DePage or some of the SPC's higher-end stuff, but certainly you can find what you're looking for.
But when you're on the road and you're dealing with low reception, simple is good. Yep. You can't beat simple. So yeah, that's a great website.
Yeah, I'd have to say, well, I've got another one, but I'll second Mario's choice of the College to page, especially the models page, because if you, not the HRRR, but the other models on there, the other feature that they have besides the representation and the graphics is they have clickable SKUTs. You can go to a point at a given time, and it'll give you the forecast SKUT, and the parameters go with it, and so you can forward that in time or go back in time, and it's really useful for that. But the one I was going to bring up is something I've started using here recently, which got awesome graphics, and it's free. I'm amazed that it's free. It's tropicaltidbits.com. If you've never tried that, look that up, tropicaltidbits.com, and then check out their model page, and it's got some pretty cool stuff on it as well. So. But I'd like to second the motion that when you're on the road and you don't have but limited connectivity, you have to be careful about loading lots of stuff with lots of graphics on it.
And I just want to give a quick little demonstration of DePage. See, I'll roll my finger along just from left to right, and it just changes. So it's, like I said, they just recently did this.
Yeah.
It's great.
Yeah. And they're continually improving it, which I like that as well. They're paying attention
on it. Yeah, they've been switching to different interfaces, just testing new things out.
Right.
And another wonderful unsung feature of the College of DuPage is the text-only area.
Yes.
Mala.cod.edu.
Right.
Especially when you're on very, very low bandwidth, you can still look at the hazardous weather outlooks for every office and all their discussions.
Right. Right. All right, well, we're getting ready to wrap this up. If I'll throw this question out to you guys and let you answer it as you see fit. If you were looking a new chaser in the eye that's getting ready to go on the Hokie Stormchase, say this year, what's the one thing that you want them to know before they climb into the vans? Kevin, I'll start with you. Kevin, why don't you go first on that one?
Get ready to ride a long time. Even if it's an active trip, we're talking, hours and hours on the road. If you know hours on the road, you don't need to be on the trip because it's a very long road trip. And I always tell people we call it storm chase trip. It's a little storm and a little more chasing, but it's mostly a long trip. A good trip, but a long trip.
Okay. Mario, what about you? What's the one thing you want to tell somebody face-to-face about a new chaser about the Hokie Stormchase?
One thing is really important is to stop looking at radar on cell phones. I mean, it's nice to keep your eyes out of the just look at the sky. I mean, you're here to watch storms, not radar. You can watch radar when you're at home. Because another thing is, too, when it comes to radar, the scans come every couple of minutes. Then they have to be uploaded to a server and then downloaded. When you're working with really slow bandwidth, that data is already old by the time you see it on your phone. So when when we're standing outside and we saw the funnel cloud right above us, we wouldn't have seen that on radar. So I think it's really important. Just like, you know what, the radar shows us where we need to go. Now let's put it away and let's look at the sky. And also, no soda. I mean, no soda. We learned that in the 2013 chase, the first chase, where we had to make multiple stops because somebody really loved Mountain Dew.
We'll leave that one for later. But you're right. You have to think about that. So But amen. I mean, take your eyes off the computer screen and your phone and look outside. So.
And physical geography is important too. Just know the terrain, know the landscapes, and know those roads.
All
There's a lot I could say.
All right, Trev, what would you tell somebody?
I mean, just an additional note on what Mario said, and a lot of the time the radar beam is at, 2, 6, 10,000 feet, and you're looking at less than 1,000 feet sometimes. So you're basically flying blind sometimes if you're only looking at radar when you're near a storm. But I would say be really careful not to overpack. You will be really surprised at how little you need. I mean, we do laundry, and I mean, the vans definitely have a stank to them at the end of the week. So, I mean, at some point you just don't worry about it. So it's the backs of those vans get really loaded up with people's luggage, and it really can be surprising how little you need when you're out there.
Right. You can make a pair of pants last a long time. I learned from the forestry department how to make a single set of change of clothes go along a couple days. So
right,
yep.
Right.
Pack light.
What about you, Chris?
Well, I was going to wrap it up here with my comments before we kind of sign off. I would second everything that you guys have said about the trip. And if I was looking at a new storm chaser, probably the best advice I could give them, this is, besides an educational trip, which it is, this is probably the essence of team building.
Yeah.
You have to be able to get along with people in the vans. You're going to spend lots of hours with them. You're going to spend every night in a room with somebody. You're sharing rooms. You've got to be able to be a team player, and which means taking into consideration things like don't drink Mountain Dew at every stop, because everybody has to stop because you have to. But all those considerations with all that considered, this is a great trip to get to know some other people and that have passion for weather just like you do, and you can also get a point of view of looking at the models and coming up with a different interpretation than you come up with, and then trying to figure out why that is. It's a great way to learn, from other people's viewpoints as well. So that's what I'd throw out. Well, guys, we're kind of hitting the 90-minute point, and that's where I like to kind of cut these because it gets long for people to watch. Appreciate each one of you guys for participating, and sorry we had our technical glitches in the beginning, but hopefully that won't mess things up too bad. Any quick, by quick I mean 15-second final thoughts?
I got one.
Okay.
We had an amazing crew. I've been, as a TA on this trip, I was so fortunate to have amazing students, great forecasters, people on their A game the entire time. So we were lucky on this trip because we had such great students.
Okay. All right.
I was blessed and honored to be a part of this. Had great help from everybody here you see on the screen. Special thanks to Jamie, who couldn't be here because he was the third driver. And if you remember, me and Chris and Jamie, I think we might have drove every mile of this trip. So wonderful help in a daunting situation for me, having to step up and for one trip.
Okay. Alrighty. Well, appreciate your guys' time, and we look forward to seeing you again somewhere out on the chase trail.
Yep. And great leaders too. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you very much.
Yes.
All right. Have a good evening, guys.
Take care.
You too. Bye-bye.
Thank you.